Yes, so I'm going to show you a bit of the material some of you might already be familiar with, because I have had the chance to present it at the Esprit Seminar series in spring, where we discussed some methodological questions. Yeah, hang on. This periodical Europa. My paper is centered around the question how this periodical or magazine participated in imagining Europe as a cultural, social, and geographical space in the late 1830s. To be more precise, I will discuss some aspects of this kind of periodical making of Europe, as I have called it in the title of my talk. I thus draw to some extent on Benedict Andersons' idea that mass media from the 19th century onwards are involved in building imagined communities. But when it comes to Lewald's Europa, I rather consider paratextual and material aspects than temporal implications, because Anderson is pretty much talking about time, in fact. In the first part of my paper, I try to give you an idea how the periodical merges ideological and economic dimensions of recirculation through politics of proliferating supplements. And in the second part of my paper, I will discuss in some more detail how the indexing of the various parts of the magazine can be understood as a kind of paratextual making of Europe. Yeah, here we have on the right-hand side the editor, August Lewald, who was a writer, journalist, actor, and theater director. And in its first years, the Europa was his most successful publishing project, with more than, 2,000 up to 3,000 subscribers. That at that time in Germany was a lot. It was an economic success. The periodical's title, Europa, Chronik der gebildeten Welt, that would be translated as Europe, Chronicle of the Educated World, has a strong programmatic dimension. It appealed to an educated, socially and financially privileged urban audience that it finds itself as part of a European society. We want to portray the great European society according to all its relations, faithful and true, starting from a fixed point of view, Lewald, the editor, summarizes at the program of Europa in an editorial note to the readers at the beginning of 1836. According to an advertisement, a notion of broadening horizons underlies the periodical. So this is a quote you can read there. It's no longer time for society to be organized in a different way in every small corner of the world and to preserve in this isolation a peculiarity that is neither enviable nor pleasing. This was, of course, Eurocentric thinking, the world, that is Europe, or more precisely, the urban centers, urban social centers or printing centers of Europe. So the aim of the periodical was therefore, as it puts itself, to present the social conditions of all nations in their various directions and relationships in a generally appealing manner, and to do so with a constant view to the capitals of the nation. The editor's vision was that of a periodical that acts as a, quote, connecting bridge to the literature of the various nations, as the mediating link of a world literature so beautifully dreamed of. The periodical thus functioned as an imagined social space, as I would argue, that both facilitated encounters between European cultures and spread stereotypical ideas. However, in the periodical's title, Europa, Chronik der gebildeten Welt, Chronicle of the Educated World, not only the targeted audience and the choice of content coincided, but it also mirrors the editorial process, insofar as the Europa was based on international literary cross-marketing to a large extent. That is, on the adoption, compilation, and of course translation of text already printed somewhere else, or sometimes yet to be printed, so kind of preprints. Along with original essays and rich correspondence, we will offer our readers translations of new publications in English, French, Italian, Spanish, Danish, and Russian literature, as well as an epitome of all that is contained daily in countless foreign journals. In addition to the connections we have established with the most important writers, a very complete number of newspapers and journals from all parts of Europe, which we receive daily, will assist our efforts. The ambiguous title, Europa, both refers to Europe as a geographically and cultural entity, and to Europe as a multi-centered print market that relied increasingly on the international transfer of visual and textual material. Thus, Europa draws attention to the fact that its media making of Europe is based on modern print technologies, new established trade connections, and modes of distribution. Accordingly, reports and correspondence from and about different countries in the more periodical-like two-column feuilleton section were complemented with translation of various literary or non-fictional texts, like novels, dramatic pieces, short narratives, many travelogues, or scenes of social life, often in full length or longish excerpt in the bookish main part of the magazine. So the magazine really consisted of two parts, one, this main bookish part, and more like two-column printed feuilleton, and there has been occasionally another supplement, Telegraph von Deutschland, that was also two-column, more kind of newspaper, periodical-like. So the sources where this content comes from were occasionally indicated, but mostly not. And although Lewald in his 1838 editorial even dreamed of a polyglot, a journal that reprints articles in various European languages without translating them, the most articles were either written in German or translated from mostly leading British or French magazines. So this idea of a polyglot, of a periodical, I mean, we had this beautiful talk this morning from Levante, who showed actually this kind of polyglot periodical, so that was just this idea, he never realized that. However, the Europa consisted not only of translated and recirculated text, but pursued the idea of bringing Europe together as and in a magazine on a more visual and indeed material basis with its various supplements. And here you can see, just for example, fashion plates, which were very common at the time. They're hand-colored and very beautiful, and in the case of the Europa, they come from the Petit Courrier de Dames, so they're Parisian fashion plates, and Lewald, the editor, constantly like advertising them that they're from Paris, and yes. So this was kind of one of the supplements through which kind of European culture came into the magazine. Already here it becomes clear that the concept and indeed the success of the magazine is based on a consistent use of the technical and distributional possibilities of the international print market of that time. Other artistic supplements, like these caricatures, for example, they are kind of, involved in the dissemination of satirical perception of specific nations, regions, or groups, in this case, English Cockney. The lithographs or steel engravings either depicted European landscapes, city views, famous buildings, or scenes of social life. I here just put a few together just to give you an idea. So here we have, for example, a view of Pest. I brought that especially to please the local organizer. And here, yeah, you can. I haven't been down there actually, but maybe today evening I could go down and see this view of Pest. Other illustrations made the German readership familiar with international stars, for example, from the Parisian opera, or famous writers of that time, or important political figures, although the magazine wasn't particularly political, in fact, quite the opposite. Before I move on to the second part of my paper, I want to show you two further examples how the magazine was involved in creating an idea of European as an imagined community, a community not in terms of a national, but in a rather weaker sense of a Eurocentric cultural belonging with clearly marked centers, namely France, Britain, and Germany. And peripheries from Portugal to Russia and Scandinavia to Turkey. So this is the first example that is an folk dance or music sheet with Hungarian folk dance to be played at the piano. And as you can see at the right-hand side, this supplement is complemented by a short essay on the Hungarian gypsies and their music. Very often these supplements correspond to the articles inside of the periodical, but not always. Sometimes they're just like supplements. And the second one is a so-called Turkish concert. Also, again, musical supplement. You can they are designed to take them out, and you can see that actually that they're like sticked in there. But normally, people would take it out to play it at the piano. And interestingly enough, in the context of the emerging Orientalism, the text of this Turkish concert isn't translated but transliterated. So you have the Turkish text there in Latin. You probably can't really see that, but at that time they used to write in Arabic, but this actually in Latin, so it's kind of strange transliteration. Unlike illustrated periodicals of the type of the Illustrated London News or Penny Magazine and all its European siblings that emerged at this very time in the 1830s, late 1830s, textual and visual material in the Europa remained separated, allowing not only for better quality and oversized formats of the various supplements, but broadened the field of media use, as the supplements were designed, for example, to pin them at the wall, or to bind them separated, or in case of the musical supplements, just to put them at the piano and then play the music and so on. So really kind of use it. Thus, the magazine understands itself as a form of medial access to the world. But again, as we can see from the subtitle of the magazine, Chronicle of the Educated World, it's only about a very kind of specific Eurocentric middle to highbrow section of the world, of course. With that, I come to the second part of my paper, in which I will pursue the question how the paratextual organization of the Europa works towards establishing European geographical and cultural centers and peripheries. Jim Mussel has drawn our attention to the imagined bookish afterlife of periodicals when pointing out that, this is a quote, the index was not only a crucial part of the paratext that constituted the periodical as a book, it also set out how the periodical as book might be read. The way periodicals think about indexing and the paratextual organization of their content is indeed strikingly telling, both in terms of their position within a broad spectrum of media formats and with regard to anticipating reading, or rather rereading and archiving practices. In the case of the Europa, the medial order programmatically reproduced geographical or geopolitical borders, as will become clear when we have a look at the table of the content. Let us first have a look at the feuilleton. So this is the kind of rather periodical, newspaper-like part printed in 2 columns. So the index for the periodical came out quarterly. So the periodical came out, in fact, Europa came out weekly, in weekly installments, and so they bound up in quarterly volumes. So 4 times a year we have this index, and the index for the feuilleton is alphabetically organized. You can see that here. Also for the Telegraph von Deutschland, so another supplement. The index of the artistic supplements I just showed you follows a different logic. It's thematically structured. So we have here, for example, portraits are listed, caricatures, illustrations of works of German poets, in this case, costumes, dramatic scenes, national portrayals, facsimiles, and of course the fashion plates, very important, and music sheets. But these categories, they're not really fixed. I mean, they vary from volume to volume a bit. The main part, however, that's the interesting one for my argument today, that is structured by region and genre, meaning that the thematically mixed sequential order of articles as they came out every week in single issues was rearranged geographically. You can see that here with subgroups for novels and other prose genres, for example. But yes, the interesting thing is starting almost every time with Germany. And then the table of content guide the reader to France and England. And interestingly enough, in the first years, it's always Germany, then England, then France. And then after about 1.5 years, they changed it. And then it's always Germany, France, England. And yes, then, so these are the kind of uncontested centers of European literary and cultural landscape. Before then, we're moving on to the rather peripheries of European literature. In this case, Greece, Italy, Russia, Spain, Turkey, and at the end, Hungary. But again, this is changing. This is not every time the same. Really depends on the content of that quarter. This paratextually structured tour through Europe always follows more or less the same pattern, although not all volumes visited all countries, kind of. And as you can see here, right at the end, there's Europäische Tagesbegebenheiten, kind of overall European category. Sometimes they have kind of miscellaneous categories for which included transnational content or sometimes other parts of the world, but that's not very often happening. Before I come to an end, I'm going to show you 2 slides which are kind of meant to support my argument about the periodical making of centers and peripheries with some figures. And I feel really I mean, it is kind of embarrassing after the keynote this morning, because it's really, I mean, this is certainly not a DH approach. This isn't even serious quantitative work. It's just like me playing around with Excel sheets a bit. But it's just about to give you an idea about the quantitative relations. And I counted only the first 5 years, 1835 to 1840, for practical reasons. Those are the ones who are good digitized. So we always rely on our sources. And there are other a second reason, because after that the periodical wasn't that successful anymore because of new political situation in Germany. So what I did, I counted the entries of the geographically structured index I showed you, so of the main part, that in fact the feuilleton section also brings together content from all over Europe, but it's not organized by the countries. As you can see, texts from or about Germany, France, and Britain make up around 70% of the content. And Spain, Italy, Greece, and Turkey are regularly considered, followed by the Netherlands, Belgium, Scandinavian countries. Even Iceland is listed once. Portugal, Hungary, Switzerland, with only a few mentions. And I have a second slide just to make this a bit visible and clear. Yeah. So again, but this is not a serious viewing or yeah, it's just a basic effort just to visualize what's going on there. To come to an end, this is Europe, this is Europa. Laura Brake has reminded us again and again to consider the normative processes which transformed ephemeral periodical issues into the omnipresent bound volumes in our libraries. It is precisely this normative and normalizing logic of a paratextual element designed specifically for archiving the bookish volumes that transformed the consecutive succession of weekly numbers with programmatically mixed European content into a national geographical order with the index. In contrast to the disassociating principle of alphabetical indexing, not just an order, but indeed, as I would argue, a hierarchy is created here that derives from, but aims beyond the logic of the print product. The media making of Europe within and by the magazine Europa clearly is concerned with establishing cultural centers and peripheries by means of narrowing down the ostensibly open European perspective of the weekly to the more hierarchical logic of the indexed-bound volumes. And by doing so, it makes the power relations of the European print market quite visible. After all, the magazine is a result of the sources it relied on, and these sources are mainly French and British and German in the end. Europe as a community with centers and peripheries, as it is imagined by the Europa, is thus a direct effect of the media-specific archival practices, which, for good or bad, are the reason that we can still study these periodicals today in bound-up volumes.